So I have my own health and safety consultancy, Optimum Safety Management, look after many, many clients, general clients, but also in the construction industry as well. So I did an update last week, a general update for everybody. And they also asked me to do a construction one. So there's a general theme I'm going to start off with, which I started off with on the last one. And then I'll just give you some specifics that I think that people in the construction industry and what they really should be looking at on site. So this is going to cover large, medium and small base sites as well. So you can take away hopefully what you can with it. I have put a few of my views in there as well, but most of it has come from the Construction Leadership Council document, the new government guidelines yesterday, and general information from the HSE website as well, which has got a whole load of information on there about getting back to work. So the main message still through any company, any industry, is if you can work at home, stay at home. And that is also in the construction industry as well. So if management can do any work from home, then still do it from home. What this will do is cut down the number of people on site. We need to keep the minimum number of people on any site, really, so we can keep the distance and ensure people's safety on site. So if any meetings can be done over like this, over Zoom or over Microsoft Teams or any other platform, then they need to still be continued like that, really, for as long as you can. So whether that's between the site managers on site and other people, directors and that within the business, to see how they're going instead of being visits to site, then that's what we need to look at, really, to cut down on the number of people that are visiting and to keep people at home as much as possible. So everyone knows that all employees must have a duty. They've got a duty of care to their employees. So this is about safeguarding their health, their safety and their welfare whilst at work. So if we can, as I say, keep people at home, stop them coming onto the site, then that's what we need. Anybody that is going onto site, we need to look after them and protect them as much as possible, which I'm going to cover some measures later on. If you keep seeing me look up, by the way, I've got a few notes. I'm like Nick, I've got a few notes behind me. So I'm reading off those. So we need to look at risk assessments. We need to mitigate the risk, reduce the risk wherever possible. Now, the government have actually said, they announced that any companies with 50 or more employees should be publishing their risk assessments on their website. I don't know if everyone knows that, but that's 50 or more. And they're advising other companies with less employees to also do the same. So it gives clear guidance on anybody that look on their websites, what measures they have in place to protect employees, contractors and third parties on site. These can go alongside any other written procedures that companies have in place and build awareness amongst all employees, which is really, really important at the moment. It's not just a box ticking exercise. It's about getting everybody on board and making sure that everybody is at the same level and working to everything that should be working to. So on the basis of that, communication is really, really key at the moment. We must have clear steps in place what companies expect of their employees on site and what those clear messages are to them as well. A good idea is to ask employees their views on things as well. They're the ones that are working on site. So it's a two-way thing, really. The management need to be asking everybody their points of view, and employees need to be giving their points of view. And that should all be taken into account as well. I think it's really important at the moment. Nick did touch on that it's Mental Health Awareness Week as well. So it's a very stressful time for everyone at the moment, more so than others. I'm very busy at the moment and it's quite stressful for me. But other people, even if they're at home, they're on their own. Communication between all employees at the moment is vitally important. Stay in touch with them. And if they are at home, then it's even more important to stay in touch with them as well. So being Mental Health Awareness Week is it's at the forefront this week anyway, which is really good. We need to protect the most vulnerable people within the business. So if anybody can stay at home, if they've got any pre-existing health conditions, if you have any pregnant ladies working for you, also try and get them working from home. They might have to be furloughed, I don't know, but we need to protect the most vulnerable in our companies as well. So the message needs to be clear to all employees that anybody showing any symptoms of coronavirus needs to stay at home and self-isolate. Now, the government have said that if anybody has got any symptoms or any of your family has got any symptoms at all, you can request a test. If you request the test, you get that within a few days. Remember to self-isolate or ask them to self-isolate in that time. And then once you get the test back, if it's positive, then of course you have to isolate. If it's negative and anybody else in your house comes back negative, then you can return to work, only if it's negative. In that time, remember to self-isolate, and that's the important message to get across. I did some reading up about the how long it can take to show as well. So it can take usually between 2 and 10 days before you show any symptoms of this, but it has been known to take up to 24 days before anybody shows any symptoms with this. It's quite rare, but it can take that long. So I'm going to get on to a few things about working on site now, and what I think sites should have in place to help protect employees, contractors and third parties. So where possible, we need to start staggering start times on site, finishing times on site. It might be that I've read last week that they're going to start extending times that, or they're applying to extend for times for construction companies to work later on. So it's going to be around 9 o'clock, I think it is. That helps with the different contractors on site, because you might be staggering start times, depending on the side of the site, over an hour, maybe 2 hours to start with, and 2 hours at the end of the day. So staggering it, changing rotas is really important. Different contractors for different zones. So if it's a big site, you can have different zones. Now that might be plots, that might be a number of plots depending on it, and you can zone out the site and then have the start times for those zones maybe instead of the types of contractors. But it's whatever works for the size of the company and the size of the site. But organisation is key really, and all the site managers need to know who's on zones and when they're moving about as well. There's been a thing about, it's been in the news from the start about washing hands. So the way that they believe that coronavirus is caught is through the respiratory system. So you're breathing it in, it goes into your mouth as well. And that's through droplets. So when they say about 2 metre distancing or working side to side or back to back within that time, it's because you're not going face to face with somebody coughing, sneezing, spitting at you as well. So the 2 metre distancing is really important, but you don't realise how much people touch their face with their hands until you start really watching people. So I've done a few site inspections, been asked to do them by my clients since this has started, to make sure that measures are in place and suitable. And you don't realise how much, just noticed Darren touching his face, you don't realise how much people touch their face when they're working as well. So this hand washing and getting the message through to people is for that, because if they touch a bit of equipment that somebody else has touched and it can lay dormant on there for over 24 hours, they touch their face with it, that's how you can contract it as well. So hand washing is really important throughout the day. So when they're leaving the vehicles, when they're entering the sites, depending on the site, the size of the site, have hand washing stations before they come onto site that people can do, like they have at supermarkets before you enter. So entering sites, you might have a gateman on there, keeping a distance, signing people in and out. He might have a hand washing station there as well before you enter any buildings, any toilet facilities, and any welfare areas as well. So hand washing is really important. Also, when you take your gloves off after operating any plant, any equipment, make sure you wash your hands before you eat, drink, or smoke if you do that as well. So communicating that is really important. I think it's been in the forefront with everybody, and we need to carry that on as well about hand washing. It doesn't have to be hand sanitizer. Soap, water, sink is the preferable method of it as well. So again, having signs up about not touching your face, cleaning your hands before you touch your face, it's so important we do that. So inductions, people have asked me about how do we deal with inductions on site. There's a few ways you can do that. You can do it as you normally would outside this time, but social distancing. So I've seen different contractors do that. Everyone's in a circle. Site manager is on the adjacent with everybody, and everybody listens to it. Some people have cut out signing books altogether. The site manager then signs in whoever's been inducted, and then some people have been taking a photo to date it of who's had the induction, when they've had the induction, to prove that they've had it as well. So there's a lot of different ways to do that and induct people to make sure there's a record that everybody has been inducted, but to do it at a distance with nobody sharing any pens for signing in, which is really important, no sharing of anything. Gloves, I've just touched on this now. Any plant really that's used, any equipment that's used on site that is going to be shared throughout the day, we need to be wearing gloves. Employees, contractors need to be wearing gloves. There needs to be no damage to the gloves either, so no splits in them, so your hand is not touching the equipment. When they take the gloves off, again, they wash hands before they do anything, but it's important to get that, especially if equipment is being shared between contractors, and that needs writing in risk assessment and safe procedures. The government is trying to refrain from anybody wearing masks on site as well. So this whole 2 metre distance, keeping that space between everybody on site. And it's quite surreal when if you go onto a site, if you haven't been already, everybody's quite mindful to stay apart as much as possible. Now, there are going to be jobs that you are going to be doing which cannot be done 2 metres apart. Where possible, these need to be side by side or back to back if you can, for short periods only. And if possible, refrain from using masks. Now, some contractors insist that masks are worn, FFP2 masks, if you are in the vicinity of 2 metres. But the government's trying to shy away from that at the moment because of the to save it for the care services and that, because a lot of people are bulk buying masks and that, and there's very little left over for hospitals and carers and everything. So try and keep the distance as much as possible. If you can't, then we need to do a risk assessment to see which is the safest way of doing that. So normal masks for normal use. So if you're in the vicinity of silica dust, asbestos, other dusts on site, you would not wear your normal FFP3 dust mask as you would do normally for those tasks. FFP3 dust mask will also protect you if it's face fit tested and it's suitable to your face, you haven't got a beard, it will be suitable. There is a HSE video about face fit testing yourself and how to do that. It's a really good video, so if you go on their website to have a look at that, you can show that to your contractors as well, because at the moment I'm not doing any face fit testing because it's not safe to do it for the people that you're face fit testing. So use your FFP3 dust masks as you normally would. Disposable ones get thrown away after they've been used. In between uses on that day, keep them as clean as possible. So if it's a disposable one, you can keep it in a Ziploc freezer bag, keep it in your pocket or keep it in your toolbox, keep it clean as much as possible. Don't have it hanging around your neck where it can be contaminated and get dirty. And then reusable ones can be cleaned as they normally would. So make sure that normal masks are being used for the tasks that create dust on site. But for coronavirus, we're trying to steer away from that and keep the 2 metre distance. I hope everyone's okay with that. So the 2 metre distance is about proximity, as I've already said. We need to keep the numbers of people you come into contact with on site to a minimum as well. So I've already said about zoning. It's really good to encourage teams as well. So the same people are working with each other on a daily basis, and not many people if possible. So try and keep the same teams together as well. And then you're minimising contact on site, especially if it's within 2 metres. So as I've already said, side by side, back to back, preventing working within 2 metres as much as possible. So what the companies can have in place is posters, toolbox talks, signage. Is really important to keep it in people's heads as well. You can get, so I've produced some toolbox talks for some of my clients that they are asking their employees to read, or they're reading out to them to ensure that they're getting all the information. I've seen some really good posters and signage out there as well that's being used. And at this time, really, you can't have too much signage. So whether it's on the floor, if it's in a construction site and you can't have it on the floor because it's dusty, have them up on the walls, hanging as many as you possibly can to keep it in people's minds all the time. It's really important that. It might be site offices. So on Thursday, I talked about changing offices around. So site offices, site cabins can be moved around. So you can keep the distance between the desks as well. 2 metres needs to be kept. Doors can be propped open as much as possible in the site offices, so door handles aren't being used. Keep those doors open throughout the day, because the HSE say about ventilation, windows open, ventilate as much as possible. If you're lucky enough to have air conditioning in your office on site, have the air conditioning on as well. Just make sure it's been serviced. And ventilate as much as you can, keep doors open and minimise touching common touch points as well. So staggering welfare breaks is important as well. So you can have on sites temporary welfare rooms can be made up. So you've not just got the one, you've got 2 or 3 on site, depending again on the size of the site. Pull the tables apart so you can distance with it. If it's a proper canteen, cover some of the seats up so they can't be used, to make sure that people can stay at a distance at all times. Hand sanitizer, again, in key areas around the site, in welfare areas, toilet areas, as many as you can dotted around so people can use them readily and readily available to do. If it's a big site as well, they're talking about pre-packed food, so you're not sharing plates, knife and forks and different things like that. But I'm encouraging the companies I look after to take their food with them, take their drinks with them as much as possible. It cuts down then on any going to canteens, going to any shops. Sites need to minimise the number of visits that people are taking out each day from the shops as well. So minimising people leaving site during the day, keep them on site and take everything with them if they can, to feed themselves and keep hydrated as much as possible. Another thing to look out for is checking traffic areas as well. So it might be that you have temporary pedestrian walkways, twice as many as you usually have, as long as they're safe and not in plant movements. So you can have one-way systems on them, one going one way, one going the other. So you can keep that distance as well. If they're big enough corridors, then have markings on the floor to show which way is one, which way is the other, to keep that distance as well. Turnstiles, you might have those on site, and to keep foot flow as minimal as possible on the same paths if you can. So I'm just going to take this one down here because I can't read that right over there. So just down to the last couple of pages, look, a couple of things now. So common touch areas. So cleaning is really, really important. It might be that you have cleaners on site. It might be that you have labourers on site. It might be that you don't have any designated people and it's on a rota. But cleaning is really, really important, especially in common areas, toilets, welfare areas, touch points, handles, door handles. If there's keypads to go into buildings, that they are cleaned regularly. In canteens as well, this is a question asked on Thursday. They were saying about common appliances that are used on site, kettles, microwaves, different things like that. If you have signs up saying clean before and after use, wash hands before and after use. So you can have tissue in there, you can have some antibacterial spray, and they clean these common touch points before and after use, and then they know they're clean to do it, then wash their hands afterwards as well. It can be really, really simple but effective the measures that you can put in place. And as long as everyone's following them, then that's all we can ask for, really. Communal areas, yeah, washing your hands. Doors to toilets, toilet areas and that, wash before, wash after, and keep the hands as clean as possible if we can. So another question, I'm just going to touch on this briefly from a question last Thursday, was about Legionella. A lot of people won't think about this when it comes to going back to site, going back to offices, is the Legionella risk as well. So sites and offices might have been shut down for 6 weeks, a month, depending on how long it is. So we need to look at having control measures in place to cut down on the risk of Legionella. So just going to run through a few things here, which is any taps on site, cold taps, open the doors, open the windows, run them for about 10 minutes. Doesn't need to be on full blast, need to run through. Toilets need to be flushed, all toilets flushed, really, really important that. Cold water tanks on the system, if you've got any tanks full of water that have not been drained down, not been cleaned, they need to be checked really by a Legionella competent person before they are used, to have them tested to make sure that there's no bacteria growth in there at all before they're used. Any showers fixed to that system need to also be not used, sign up, do not use until that system's been checked and the green light's been given to use it. If you've got any electric showers on site, make sure, open the windows, open the doors, or close the door, open the window if there is one, to the room. Have the showers on hot, run that through for about 10 minutes as well, and you should be okay to do that, as long as the temperature is above 60 degrees on hot. Water coolers, if you've got bottles on the water coolers, they haven't been taken off, take the old, whether it's a full one or not, take it off, don't use the bottle that's on the water cooler, sterilise the inside, sterilise the taps, or get your maintenance person out. Once you've done that, you can put the water cooler back on the actual system and you'll be okay to go. Lastly on this is the hot water boilers. Turn the hot water boilers back on, let them boil back up, run a load of water off, let them fill back up again, boil back up, and then you should be good to go with that, because over 60 degrees, Legionella won't grow, okay? Anywhere below 20 degrees, it won't do either. So, which is why it's really important you have those things in place. If you want a list of those sending through, just that list, I can do that afterwards if you want. I think meetings face-to-face, I covered this earlier on. If you have to have meetings face-to-face on site, either outside, 2 metre distance, if it's inside, if it's raining, if it's cold, or you have to do that, then make sure the seating is adequate for the 2 metre distance, with tables and chairs and that arranged so you can do that. But ideally, they need to be remotely carried out or outside if possible. Limit number of visitors to site as well. So what we need to do is meet people outside, limit the visitors, have them over this as much as possible. Deliveries need to be maintained as well. So ideally, keep deliveries to certain times. Drivers stay in them if possible. They can be unloaded like that, but got to be suitable control measures in place for deliveries on site. Travelling to and from work, I'm just going to cover this one quickly. So as the government have said, try and walk, cycle, travel alone to site, if possible in your vehicles. If you do have to share, try and keep it to a minimum, i.e. one in the front of the car, one in or van. If it's a van, you'll have to have them in the front, because unless it's a crew cab. If it's a car, one in the front, one in the back, on the opposite sides if possible. So there's no temptation of turning sideways and talking to the driver, because it's about minimising that distance. Stare straight ahead if you can, open the windows up and clean the car afterwards, hand washing before and after if you can. So I've covered cleaning plant, wearing gloves as well. Just quickly, if you're working in other people's premises, so if you're going into other people's premises, communication is key with this. So small companies working in domestic premises, communication with the occupant to make sure that all control measures are in place before you go to site. If they're vulnerable, it might be that somebody has to be there to let you in, 2 metre distance at all times. And again, risk assessments in place, making sure that you are staying at 2 metres, ventilating the area as much as possible. Last point, really, is this isn't just management responsibility. As with health and safety, it's got to be across the board, really. Everybody has got to take the measures that the company has put in place on board. Everybody has got to follow them. I've been on site up in Barnsley, and there was some contractors up there that the rules were in sight about social distancing, and some contractors on site, some joiners, just didn't care at all, pushing past you in doorways, and they weren't taking heed of the control measures that were in place. So anything like that, I mean, I had a word with them about it, but anything like that, really, they should be yellow carded, given a warning, and after that, taken off site, because if they're not following it, they're putting everyone's lives at risk. So this is employees, contractors, everybody's responsibility to take the measures that companies have in place and take them on board. It's everyone's responsibility at the moment. And that is me just about done. Thank you.